Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayana Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet. Hare Krishna. We are continuing with our discussion of the third canto. Today we will be before we conclude the chapter, we would want to just briefly summarize because we did not have a session in the previous week, and we just want to kind of catch up on what we discussed until thus far. Most importantly, um, the conversation that we are hearing right now is a conversation that occurred between Srila Sukadev Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj, which was heard by Sutta Goswami, which was inquired upon by Shaunaka Rishi, audience of Sutta Goswami and Naimisharanya. But the original conversation that was spoken of by Sukadev Goswami to Srila Parikshit Maharaj was that which occurred between Vidura, the last brother, the youngest brother of the of Dhritarashtra and Pandu, the younger brother of Dhritarashtra and Pandu, and Maitreya Rishi, who was a great sage, and Vidura was basically had the opportunity to have his association. So there was great eagerness in wanting to know what the conversation was between Vidura and Maitreya Rishi. Now, what is very important as we begin here is that Vidura, he was an incarnation of the potency of Yamaraj. He was the incarnation of Dharma. So, as a consequence, he was extraordinarily adept in Niti Shastra. He was extraordinarily adept in rules, regulations, and what needs to be done. And as a consequence, he was also very devoted to the Lord because he was a Mahajan. He already had the blessing of being a Mahajan. He was a very close associate of the Lord, one of the Mahajans. Now, what is interesting from this particular chapter is that one could be born as a Mahajan, one could be a Mahajan, considered to be the authorities of scripture in devotional service, one who sets moral precedent, one who sets precedent in terms of being able to, someone could assume, in other words, they could take as an example and follow in his footsteps and be very successful, which is the whole purpose of Shastra. So this was a personality who was a Mahajan. He was one of the principal demigods, and he was also basically a direct associate of Krishna, and he was basically related to Krishna as well. And he was brought into this world by Srila Vyasadeva. So you can just imagine the amount of blessings which Sri Vidura had in being the family of Kurus and being able to associate with Krishna. But despite being born in such, an extraordinarily advantageous role, advantageous family, advantageous birth, Sri Vidura had to go on a pilgrimage. And the truth of the matter is that his spiritual credits were highly diminished because he had associated with offenders. So, this is how we began the chapter. His spiritual credits were diminished because he associated with offenders. Now, again, I want you to realize he is an extraordinarily lofty personality. He is Yamaraj. He's one of the Mahajans. He's an authority on scripture. He's an authority on devotional service. And he is a personal associate of the Lord. He is brought into this world through the agency of the Lord's incarnation, Srila Vyasadeva. And he is a personal associate of the Lord. He could have personal service. He recognized Krishna as a supreme person, was able to render personal service, to Krishna. Now, such a person could still lose spiritual credits whilst coming in touch with offenders. He lost his spiritual credits and he felt that he need to replenish them. Now, the Lord facilitated this desire. So we spoke about it in the previous session when we gave the class for Govardhan Rila, that the Lord in 15:15 of the Bhagavad Gita talks about saying that from him comes remembrance and from him come forgetfulness. So from within, Krishna is guiding the devotee because the devotee is dependent on him and is constantly endeavoring. So the intelligence to reach him is being given by the devotee. This is also the conclusion of 10:10 of the Bhagavad Gita, yeah, the Chatushloki. Now, the point being that
Right.
Krishna notices that the association of Vidura with offenders had actually diminished his spiritual capacity. Now, what is this wonderful statement meaning to us? It means that even a personal associate of the Lord, who has extraordinarily lofty position in the overall structure of the universe, who has personal service, and who has had great, I would say, good fortune of being connected to the Lord in so many different ways, even he can become diminished because of the potency of material energy, because it's the Lord's material energy. And it is also such that even they can actually lose their spiritual credits. Now, this is also an indication of how Jaya and Vijaya, the two gatekeepers of Krishna, they were actually the gatekeepers in Vaikunta, but this Vaikunta was a part of Shirodakashayi Vishnu's potency. So, in other words, this Vaikunta was actually an outpost in one sense. It was an extension of Vaikunta, but within the material sky. As a consequence, Jaya and Vijaya were also in touch with the material sky, even though they were in Vaikunta. This was a part of the material sky. So they were geographically situated, but this was a part of the material sky. So you could come in touch with matter. So when the great sages, the four Kumaras, traveled up to Vaikunta to enter into the what do you call it, the realm of Vaikunta, Jaya and Vijaya, they are tatastha. They are in the border. You see, they are gatekeepers. So they are in tatastha. They are not in the spiritual potency. They are not in the material potency. They are right at the gate of the spiritual sky before they can allow these sages to enter. And because they are right at the gate of the spiritual sky, tatastha, which is intermediary, which is borderline, which can fall either way, they come in touch with material energy. And then, as a consequence, they commit offenses to the sages. The sages basically start cursing them. Now, when they start cursing them to take birth in demonic bodies, 3 lifetimes in demonic bodies, I guess the 3 lifetimes in demonic bodies, the curse was being uttered. It is said that Lord Vishnu, he forgot even to wear his shoes, his sandals, and he comes running down from his seat to welcome the sages and to apologize for the offenses that were committed by his servants. And the first statement which Lord Vishnu makes, in one sense, Lord Narayana makes is he tells the sages that my servants, he does not say that they have committed an offense. He says, my servants have forgotten me. My servants have forgotten me. So the root of offenses is that we forget Krishna. That's why Krishna in 15:15 of the Bhagavad Gita says, from remembrance, both remembrance and forgetfulness comes from me. So one can remember and one can forget. Both can come from Krishna. As a consequence, one can forget Krishna. One can actually forget Krishna, and that is the time when they also start committing offenses. So the offensive behavior of Jaya and Vijaya, Krishna apologizes, Vishnu apologizes to the Kumara brothers, and he tells them that my servants have actually forgotten me. He does not say that they committed this offense and that. They basically, he makes a statement saying they have forgotten me. If they had remembered me, then there would be no question of offenses. Yeah. In a similar fashion, even if one could be personal associates of the Lord, and if they are in the company of offenders, they can forget the Lord. This is very important for us to understand. That's why association becomes so important. And when we are in association, valuing association and being careful is also so important because you can commit offenses and you can forget Krishna, and then more offenses begin. So, in other words, one can basically forget Krishna, and Krishna will facilitate it, and then offenses also begin. So, in this particular case, Vidura found that his capacity, or rather his spiritual credits, had diminished. One can say that he is being very humble, but then Srila Prabhupada also writes, there are other acharyas who have also written that spiritual credits have diminished because he was actually hearing the blasphemous words of Duryodhana and Dhritarashtra. He was a part of the arrangement. He was receiving remuneration as a minister. So when you receive remuneration as a minister, etc., from an offensive group of people who are literally offending the Lord, then our own spiritual capacity can be diminished highly, who are offenders, direct offenders. There's a very big difference between sinning and offending. Sinning, have requisite knowledge for you to distinguish what is right and what is wrong. Offenses, on the other hand, is when you commit offenses despite being given the opportunity to know more. So in this case, Dhritarashtra, Duryodhana, they've all been reiterated so many times. They are seeing the seniors in the family worship the Lord, but they are not able to accept the fact. And as a consequence, this is categorized as an offense. Now, after knowing that you are in a company of offenders, if you continue with the association, that association is asatsanga. We want satsanga, we want sadhu sangha. Now, if you have association of the opposite kind, the opposite results would also be experienced. There would be a depletion of credits. Now, how did he replenish? He replenished the credits by going to pilgrimage sites. What happens in pilgrimage sites? In a pilgrimage site, such as Vrindavan, Mayapur, Rishikesh, Jagannath Puri, the different pilgrimage sites, the potency of the Lord is such that when you go there, you have the ability to meet with sadhus. The whole idea of going on a pilgrimage, touch with exalted personalities, and by service to the exalted personalities, whilst being on parikrama, then you have an ability to change the course of life. So the spiritual credits during parikrama come due to seva done when coming in touch with sadhus. So sadhu sangha and sadhu seva in parikrama is super important because that's where the credits come from. Now, the parikrama itself, the site of parikrama itself, is purified by the presence of such Vaishnavas because you have many who come to the pilgrimage sites with the purpose of offloading their sins. So, who is going to offset that particular capacity of people to offload their sins? The offset comes from the Vaishnavas, whose potency is such that they have the ability to alter the experience and be able to give help to those who come there. So that's why we say that when you visit the Dham, you see the Dham through your ears. Without being in the association of devotees, being in the Dham is not that easy because one may not gain much. One could become offensive. One could probably not understand what to do and what not to do in a certain circumstance. They could focus on the wrong things. They might simply not have the capacity to appreciate the Dham. But the sadhu has so much love for the Dham that their heart speaks of so much of the Dham that then that particular feeling, that mood, that love penetrates into our consciousness and we become purified. So Srila Vidura went on a pilgrimage site to replenish his credits. Now, why is a credit important? A credit becomes important because you can't do anything without credits. Some of us who come into devotional service, we come with a lot of credits. As a consequence, at the very first opportunity, they take off like a rocket. There are others who come into devotional service who have to accumulate credit. They are given credit by the spiritual master and by Lord Nityananda, but they have to keep adding on to it for them to be able to move forward. So the process of adding and for them to be able to replenish and for them to be able to increase the quantity of credits, that is done through seva, through chanting, through everything else, is how they move up. They move up. But they notice that someone alongside them, who apparently by vision, joined more or less at the same time, is accelerating while they are struggling with what is considered to be basic. Why is this so? This is so because the other person has come with credits. When you engage in seva, when you engage in seva, you accumulate credits. When you bring someone from outside, they may not do much in this lifetime. They may just work in the kitchen of the temple or the preaching center. And if they wash a few pots and they render service through their limbs, they would make immense advancement. They would accumulate credits. These credits, combined with their desires, would allow them to come more firmly into the movement. So credits are important because you cannot manifest anything without credits. Credits are required because it allows you to accelerate. It allows you to basically accelerate. This is like currency. This is soft currency where these credits themselves give us the ability to what we would call as fulfill our desires and be able to move forward. So why is it that some of us accelerate, some of us cannot? It's because some come with credits and some don't. Some have already made the advancement and some others are still trying to make the advancement. So Krishna consciousness, in one sense, in manifestation of results, is similar. It is not the same, it is similar. Why so? Because different people have come with different level and gradations of advancement. And as they come here with different gradations of advancement, their own experiences vary, their experiences and their manifestation varies because they've already crossed many, many levels in the previous lifetime. So in this lifetime, you would suddenly find years into the movement, they're already kind of, being able to fix themselves in sadhana and be able to move forward. They're very determined. And so this is very important. So Vidura, he actually went around wanting to basically replenish his store of credits that were highly depleted because of offensive company. He was not an offender. He was in the company of offenders. Imagine being an offender. This is just being in the company of offenders is so diluting. Imagine being an offender. It's practically, I guess, one of the worst experiences one could have after coming in touch with pure devotional service, because it's one of the worst things that one could imagine having. Now, what is also being learned by us is that in a fundamental way, we also learned about Krishna's family. We learned about the fact that Krishna never leaves Vrindavan, and Krishna expands into Balaram. Lord Balaram is the Sevaka Bhagwan, he is the serving potency. From Sri Balaram, you have the first quadruple expansion, which is Vasudev, Shankarshana, Anirudh, Pradyumna, who are in Dwaraka. This is the first quadruple expansion. The same Vasudeva of Dwaraka becomes Lord Ram, Lakshman, and Shatrughna and Bharata and Shatrughna. Yeah, in other realms, the same quadruple expansion. Krishna never leaves Vrindavan. It is Balaram who expands. Then there is a second quadruple expansion from Dwaraka and from Ayodhya. The second quadruple expansion, the Vasudev is Narayan, and then you have, so Sankarshana is Mahasankarshana, and then you have Aniruddha and Pradyumna. And these four personalities basically are Narayana, and then they develop and they expand into the what we would call as the um, uh, Purusha avatars, who manage the the universe and the affairs of the universe. So there is the Karanodakashayi Vishnu, Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, Shirodakashayi Vishnu, and then you have an expansion from the Karanodakashayi Vishnu and Rama Devi, who is his consort. They expand into Lord Shiva and Mother Durga to manage the material universe. The Lord Shiva and Mother Durga, they are the father and mother of the material universe, and then they manage the material universe from there on. So the same personalities are also associated in Dwaraka as Krishna's sons and grandson, etc. And these personalities also empower the demigods. So, for example, we heard that one could be born. There's Kamadev, who is Pradyumna, Krishna's son. Now, the point is that when Pradyumna is Krishna's son, in the spiritual sky, he is Pradyumna, the fourth of the quadruple expansions. But his potency is also that he is the transcendental Cupid. Yeah, he is the transcendental Cupid. So there is a personal. He is one of the. So he's an expansion of the Lord. So in the realm of Dwarka, he is the transcendental Cupid. But then Krishna is called the transcendental Cupid. But Pradyumna is the incarnation. In the incarnation of Pradyumna in Dwaraka, he is Cupid. Yeah. But the potency of Pradyumna is experienced. Then you have Aniruddha, and then you have Sankarshana, who is the Balaram of Dwaraka. So these are the four personalities. So these are the different expansions who also come to manage the universe. And then we also spoke a little bit about Sri Uddhava, because Sri Vidura comes in touch with Uddhava during his pilgrimage. And then when he enters into Mathura, he meets Uddhava. And at that point in time, Sri Uddhava, who is the cousin of Krishna, but who has characteristics which are almost similar. His personality is almost similar. You can say that he is identical. So this personality is so close to Krishna that right from childhood, he has been serving the Lord, and he was a natural devotee. He is a Nitya Siddha, obviously, but he was a natural devotee. Right from childhood, he has been worshipping the Lord. And he meets him and he starts associating with him and starts inquiring from him about the different personalities of the family of Kurus, even though Vidura came to know that the Lord had departed and the Yadus had basically vanquished themselves through fights, etc. He knew that, but yet he was in disbelief. So he was wanting to psychologically inquire so that he could somewhat, assure himself, just so that, hope against hope, as we would call it, that everything is all right with his beloved Krishna and his associates. So he was wanting to talk to him in that sense. Now, what we need to understand is, as Vidura continues his conversation, this Uddhava is such an amazing, great personality that Sri Uddhava himself is considered to be a Sishya of Sri Brihaspati, the guru of the demigods. So there are Sishyas who follow the philosophy of Brihaspati. There are scholars who follow the philosophy of Sukracharya, who is the preceptor of the demons. So both of these Brahmanas, Brihaspati and Sukracharya, are preceptors, but there are different schools of thought and there are different, I would say, treatises in terms of politics, in terms of so many other subjects which these personalities have brought forth. So to be a direct student of Brihaspati was a great qualification because he is considered to be the storehouse of all Vedic knowledge, which essentially means that everything and anything that had to be known in terms of the intricacies of the Vedic aspect, all the Vedas, that was known to Sri Uddhava, which essentially also means that he was trained to observe the world through his intellect rather than through his heart. So that was a difference. That is why Srimad Bhagavatam very specifically highlights that he was a disciple of Brihaspati. Why couldn't Srimad Bhagavatam stop by saying he is a cousin of Krishna? That's complete qualification. But Bhagavatam says no, he was a cousin of Krishna, but he was also a disciple of Brihaspati, which essentially means that they are wanting to highlight that there would be an intellectual process, because if one studies so much and has learned things through intellect, has learned things through serious shastric study, they would tend to be analytical and they would observe things analytically as well. And if they don't understand things analytically, they can't really accept it. It's difficult for them. So they cannot accept certain confidential aspects of Krishna can't be understood by them, because their intellect would dismiss it as being sentimental. Yeah. So, for example, if the Rajvasis are crying in separation, then that might be difficult for Sri Uddhava to fully comprehend, because in his mind, he has already understood that the personality of Godhead Krishna is the super soul. He is not going anywhere. He is the origin, he is the beginning, he is the middle, he is the end. So he can't go anywhere. So this particular process has already set in on how he is going to approach the Lord. Yeah. This great good fortune of seeing the Lord in his personal form and not being distracted by Aishwarya, the wealth and the opulence and the power of the Lord, that good fortune rests completely with the Vrajavasis. Yeah, Dwaraka does not have that good fortune, because Dwaraka, Krishna displays his opulences of, all kinds of opulences. He interacts there as a king. So there's an automatic, I would say, formality between the subjects and the king. You have to approach the king with certain formality. But in Vrindavan, yeah, he is a cowherd boy, completely approachable. He also makes himself completely accessible because of his Leela. Yeah, complete, because he convinces them he's not anybody, but he's just a child. He goes, he robs things. Yeah, he robs as if he's an hungry child. Who can say Krishna is hungry? He isn't hungry, but then he is hungry because of the potency of Yogamaya. He is irritable because people are not paying attention to him. He breaks pots. He basically chases after things, and he does all kinds of activities which cannot really be ascribed to being anywhere close to the great opulence of Narayana, which is what Uddhava knows Lord Krishna as. So his intellect wouldn't allow him to accept Krishna as the cowherd boy, and his intellect wouldn't allow him to be overpowered. Yeah, because the identity of seeing him in Dwaraka has already been established. Now, this is very important for us to understand as well. Then this Sri Uddhava is asked to describe about the qualities of others, and Vidura is asking him question after question after question, and he asks about Mother Devaki. He asks about Mother Devaki in a way which was quite interesting. He says, how is this great personality? Basically, she carried the essence of the Vedas in her womb, because the essence of the Vedas is Krishna. And having Krishna in her womb means that she had the entire body of knowledge and the conclusion of the Vedas in her womb. So she was practically able to capture the entire Vedic knowledge and the conclusion of the Vedas within her womb. Yeah, just as Mother Yashoda is able to tie Damodar with the rope of love, Mother Devaki had this Damodar, this Krishna, in her womb. But then did not allow her to participate fully in Vatsalya. He comes out and he displays the four-armed form, which practically one can never forget if you see. So Mother Devaki sees the four-armed form, and she knows that what she has, what whom she has given birth is the Supreme Lord Himself. Now, how much of a mother can you be when your son shows four arms as soon as he is born, and then he starts instructing you? So this particular fortune is left only to Mother Yashoda, which is in the Brajavasis. So there is absolutely no intellectual imposition. There is no clouding of supremacy of Aishwarya. That's why Brajalila is Shuddha Bhakti. When Mother Yashoda is calling Krishna's names and she says Krishna, that is Shuddhanam. There is basically no tinge of Aishwarya. The sweetness of her love is completely covering over the potency of the Lord to such an extent that she forgets who the son is. She can't even remember. She ties him up, chases him, chastises him, and then worries about him all, protects him with all kinds of spells and so on. So she is basically a mother 100%. So the Vatsalya in Vrindavan is 100% pure. If a Sakya in Vrindavan is 100% pure, there is complete familiarity, which is the root, I would say, characteristic of real Sakya friendship, is that the friend sees nothing but a friend. Yeah. So the cowherd boys saw nothing but their friend. It is said in a wonderful book. There was this wonderful book by one of the acharyas who came in the line of Lord Nityananda's Gopals, and there he describes the cowherd boy pastimes. It's, I think, the only book which is out there. Now, this particular book, in that book, basically, you have this description that when Krishna goes missing in the afternoon, Sridama, Sudama, everybody else, all the cowherd boys, they start losing consciousness because they can't see him. So for them, this is their dear friend who has gone missing for a moment and they can't really find him. Krishna actually slips away. He goes to meet Radharani in the afternoon, and then the cowherd boys practically look for him and they start losing consciousness because they find that he is missing. They can't really stay in separation from him. Sri Balaram, who knows where Krishna has gone, yeah, even though he's the older brother and there's so much formality in this respect, he's aware. He is Sevaka Bhagwan, so he does the seva. He pacifies this Sridama, Sudama, and everybody else. He distracts them, and then Krishna has just gone away with Shubal and others to meet with Srimati Radharani and her friends. So the point being that the Sakyaras in Vrindavan is called Vishramba. There's no difference between, they don't find a difference between themselves and Krishna. They don't find a difference at all. They start the day at 7, sorry, early in the morning. They come to Nandagaon and they just come to wake him up. And as soon as he is awake, and then Mother Yashoda is giving him a bath, and then Krishna and Balaram are milking the cows, and then basically he's getting ready. They go back to their homes so that they could get ready for the day. So they come and they have, I would say, an exchange before they head out to just wake him up. Yeah. And then they go back to their homes. So for them, there is complete, I would say, non-difference between them and the Lord, which is true friendship. Friendship, you can't have a superior, inferior. Friendship has to be amongst equals. Otherwise, the taste of friendship is actually overpowered by the authority of someone who is superior or otherwise. As a consequence, these cowherd boys could actually make Krishna do things for them. They fight with him quite ferociously. Yeah, there are stick fights. Yeah, they're wrestling fights, just as young boys would. They wrestle with him, they fight with him. Yeah, so there's some level of transcendental anger which is displayed by them, because you have to have some anger when you're in a sport and when you're in a competitive sport such as wrestling. So they fight with him. They have stick fights. They have mud fights. They have all kinds of things. So there's this typical idea of friendship, and in that particular friendship, you don't have the tinge of authority. You don't have the tinge of Aishwarya. So the friendship, the parenthood, the servitude, all of these in Vrindavan does not have the tinge of Aishwarya. This is the specialty. Now, an intellectual personality who has studied Shastra, the Vedas, and then has practically learned how to approach a transcendental subject matter through his knowledge, scholarly knowledge, they can't really get into the sentimental aspects of it unless they're already experiencing it in their own relationships. But in Sri Uddhava's case, the relationship with Krishna was different because it was in Dwaraka. There were tinges of formality, so he couldn't really overcome all of these when he comes into the realm of Vrindavan. That is being highlighted in the verse, and we spoke about it, saying that he is a Brahaspati Sishya. So he basically has to approach things quite analytically, shastrically, even though he is one of the dearest associates of the Lord. Now, then we also basically spoke about the different Pandavas, and then finally, Sri Vidura comes to verse number 42. Yeah, let's sorry 41, and then we will continue from 41 onwards for today. We'll conclude the chapter. Verse 41, the translation is, "O gentle one, I simply lament for Dhritarashtra, who rebelled against his brother after death. By him I was driven out of my own house, although I'm a sinner, because he accepted the line of action adopted by his own sons." Yeah. So now this is an interesting verse. Here, Vidura is lamenting for Dhritarashtra. And the reason why he is lamenting for Dhritarashtra is because he is feeling compassion even though he was extraordinarily badly treated. Vidura was also like the guru, Siksha Guru, giving constant advice to Dhritarashtra on what to do and what not to do, whether he liked it or he didn't like it. He was constantly giving him the right advice. But then Vidura, even though he played that role, he was actually literally booted out of the home. This was the Lord's arrangement. He was booted out so that he could go on pilgrimage and replenish his credits because the end of the Kauravas had already been there. If Vidura had associated, Krishna would have probably found it difficult to completely remove the Kauravas from the planet. So Vidura had to leave. But what is interesting about this verse is that Vidura basically is lamenting for someone who did not do well to him, lamenting for someone who ill treated him. So this is quite interesting. You know, in all the accounts that we read of Srila Prabhupada over the years, all the accounts that we read of Srila Prabhupada, there were many, many instances where there were some disciples who particularly did things in Srila Prabhupada's tenure on the planet that were very distasteful and offensive to the spiritual master. They rebelled against him. In fact, they didn't allow him to even come to the properties they managed. There was all kinds of things happen during Srila Prabhupada's time. But Srila Prabhupada never ever cursed them, never. Because and Srila Prabhupada writes in Srimad Bhagavatam that cursing of a disciple by a guru is the mode of ignorance. And the guru should never have the mode of ignorance. So there should be no such thing as a cursing of a disciple by a guru. There can be anger to chastise. And Srila Prabhupada used to do plenty of that. There was never such thing as a curse where everything is robbed out of the guru, out of this disciple's life. Everything gets robbed because the displeasure of senior Vaishnavas who are accomplished would mean devastation at a material and spiritual level. This is basically a fact. There would be devastation. So this particular offense which is being committed by the disciples was never taken by Srila Prabhupada as an offense. He never took offense, even though there was offense. And he basically used to be a well-wisher because this was exactly what Srila Prabhupada was, inside and out. Always a well-wisher, even though there was so much which was done while he was on the planet by others who basically went against his desires. So he never ever cursed them. So this is a very important principle that those who are in the position of devotional service as Vaishnavas, they would never desire the destruction of even their enemies, which is what is being seen, because that even that ounce of envy, that small pinch of envy which is permissible, is not found. Is not found at all. Yeah, this is not found in Vidura. He is non-envious, which is the primary quality of a Vaishnav, and he is actually lamenting for Dhritarashtra, even though Dhritarashtra treated him very badly. Srila Prabhupada's activities were like that. Um, uh, there's also this particular statement that just as much as a baby, a very small child, a toddler, wouldn't know how to behave with an older person, regardless of who they are. Regardless of whether they are exalted or they're just ordinary, they wouldn't know. Yeah, they wouldn't know. And as a consequence, they might pass, urine, etc. They might commit offenses on the great personality, but yet the great personality doesn't really bother because they look at them and say that there's an ignorant child. This is the attitude of the spiritual master towards disciples. So that is being exemplified here by Sri Vidura, and Srila Prabhupada basically carried that particular, what I would call as personality. He practically had that personality. He used to chastise very heavily, and chastisement is required. Without chastisement, there's a certain level of, I would say, lack of mercy. The spiritual master has to chastise, and when he chastises, there's a special mercy there. Yeah, and chastisement is also quite different. They are very sensitive to whom to chastise, how to chastise. There are different degrees, but the spiritual master should chastise. But there's no such thing as cursing. Yeah, by spiritual masters, especially Vaishnavas, which is being exemplified by Sri Vidura in this particular verse. So he is actually a well-wisher, regardless of how he is being treated. Yeah, this is basically Manadena. He has accepted life. Trinadapi sunichena taro riva sahishnuna. Amani manadena kirtane sadahari. This is so easy to perform kirtan because he is transcendently situated. He is not taking offense, even though there's every good reason to take offense. So, text 42, I'm not astonished at this, having traveled over the world without being seen by others. The activities of the personality of Godhead, which are like those of a man in the mortal world, are bewildering to others, but I know of his greatness by his grace, and thus I'm happy in all respects. Yeah. So this is quite. There's the next verse where he's talking about the fact that one of the most bewildering aspects of incarnations are Krishna and Rama. Why are Krishna and Rama so bewildering? Because they came in the human form. Because they came in the human form and they displayed human like qualities. They interacted with brothers, they interacted with the mother, interacted with cousins. All these human qualities were displayed by Lord Ram and Lord Krishna. And this is extraordinarily bewildering because it's very difficult to understand the personalities of Godhead when they come in the human form because we can't see past them. Yeah, Srila Prabhupada used to say, he used to say this. He used to say there are two very dangerous jobs in the whole universe. One is to be the servant of Sri Sri Radha Madhav, and the other is to be my servant. Srila Prabhupada used to say that because both are so dangerous, is because you could think the spiritual master is an old man and he's dependent on me, and he basically, needs care because he's dependent. You could see him fall sick, and he could see him go through all which a human body could have, but yet he is the personal associate of the Lord, yet he is the giver of mercy. He is practically the means for us to be delivered to the lotus feet of the Lord. So the point is, the offense committed is to assume that the spiritual master is an ordinary person, or the offense committed is to think that the deity of the Lord is stone and there isn't what we would call life in the deity. Both of these are extraordinarily powerful offenses because in both cases, the bewilderment is such that one case the spiritual master is in a human body, the other of stone or wood, and then we start thinking that this is not the deity because this bewilderment is there. So now, in a similar fashion, when the Lord appears in a human form, there's great bewilderment because he displays qualities of a human being, and as a consequence, there's great bewilderment. It's easy to understand when the Lord appears with weapons and associates, etc., but when he comes in the human form, very difficult. The appearance of the Lord is manifested for the annihilation of the upstarts. His activities are transcendental and are enacted for the understanding of all persons. Otherwise, since the Lord is transcendental to all material modes, what purpose could he serve by coming to earth? So basically, unless a devotee is involved, Krishna doesn't get involved. If he is coming to kill, he is coming to kill a devotee. Yeah, Jaya and Vijaya, they were devotees. Hiranyaksha, Hiranyakashipu, they were devotees in the previous era. As a consequence, Krishna doesn't directly come in touch with material energy. He comes in touch with what we would call as rasa. There is some kind of a relationship which has gone sour because of conditioning. He comes to remove the conditioning so that the relationship can be restored. Yeah. So he appears because he is transcendental. He comes here and engages in activity which is also completely transcendental even though externally it may be appearing to be something else. O my friend, please therefore chant the glories of the Lord, who is meant to be glorified in places of pilgrimage. He is unborn, and yet he appears by his costless mercy upon the surrendered rulers of all parts of the only for their interest did he appear in the family of his unalloyed devotees of the Yadus. Unalloyed devotees, the Yadus. Yeah. So this is the last verse. So this is a very good verse because he says, chant the glories of the Lord, which is exactly what we ought to be doing. And the glorification of the Lord in places of pilgrimage. He is unborn, and yet he appears to by his costless mercy. Yeah, so this is like what you would call a diunital concept. Um, the spiritual world is diunital. Contradictions, apparent contradictions, can coexist in complete harmony in the spiritual space. Yeah. So apparent contradictions can coexist in complete harmony in the in the spiritual sky. So you have, for example, the Lord is unborn, but yet he is someone's child. The Lord is the oldest, yet he is always young, always youthful, ever youthful. It's always Purana Purusha Nava Yavana. Yeah, and then there is Radharani and Krishna are the same, but yet they are different. They can coexist. There is no such thing as a disharmonious relationship. Radharani and Krishna being the same because Radharani is the internal potency of the Lord. She is the but yet there is they are the same and yet they are different because they step out each other. Yeah. So these are a few contradictions. So here, when two people interact, you can't really call them as the same because they are different. Here contradictions are contradictions. In the spiritual sky, the contradictions can coexist. And the beauty is contradictions can coexist in great harmony, which is what is being highlighted. This is definitely a spiritual phenomenon. You can't find it in the material sky because here it's all completely dual by nature. In the spiritual sky, this concept of being unitary, which is diunital, is very clearly observed, where you can have very clear contradictions enmeshed together, but in a very harmonious state. Yeah. So we stop here. We'll see what questions you have, if any. And then next week we'll continue with chapter 2. All right. So I believe there was. Okay. So the question is, most of us work in organizations where the leadership is driven by profits and they may have blasphemed the Lord in some ways. We get a remuneration, a salary from them. Does that affect us then, please? The answer is yes, it can. But because we use a part of that particular remuneration in the service of the Lord, we are absolved from the karmic reactions they bring. So, in one sense, being in the material world is a contamination because this material existence is the opposite of spiritual nature. So, it is a contamination, it is a contradiction. The average person in the world hates the Lord even though they claim they love him. They really don't like him. For example, an impersonalist an impersonalist says the Lord doesn't exist. Yeah. An impersonalist basically says that everything is Maya. Once you cross over, there's no such thing as the Lord. Everything is just completely the Lord's potency in terms of his effulgence, but there really isn't anything else. So these are basically aspects of great offenses because they literally are saying that the Lord doesn't exist. There's a very envious platform. However, the point is that when we use what is being given to us in the service of the Lord, a lot of this does get mitigated, it improves upon, but this problem does exist. We have to acknowledge that this problem exists, and we have to aspire somehow or the other at all times that we have to have a plan to be able to engage in a greater level of service at a future date. And the present employment and the remuneration is a means to an end. And because the end is greater than the means, and as a consequence, your existence can be purified. That's how you should understand it. Okay. Anything else? Any other question, comment that I could help with?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Can you hear
Hare
me?
Krishna. Yes, I can. Yes, please go
Uh,
ahead.
yeah, I have some question, but not related to this class. Can I ask Prabhuji?
Yes, please try. I can try my best.
Okay. Yeah. So these days, my wife is actually singing Durga Devi prayer, and
Hmm.
in that something comes as a Adyanta Rahita. Okay. So my understanding is it's only Krishna who doesn't have beginning and ending, and the rest all have it.
Mm.
So how to
Mm.
understand this when she's singing for Durga Devi as Adyanta Rahita Devi? So how to take it? How to understand this?
You can understand it in two ways. Number one, how you should understand, and we should go back to seeing what Srila Vyasadeva did for us. Srila Vyasadeva compiled so many different Puranas. The Puranas themselves were classified into the three modes of nature. So there was mode of goodness, mode of passion, mode of ignorance. There are three different levels of consciousness, mixture of three level reference of consciousness. Each of these personalities in different levels of consciousness, they access help and they access Shastra based on their consciousness. And in that particular consciousness, in that particular Shastra, that personality whom they access is supreme because they're reaching that personality as supreme. It's a completely narrow focus that that personality is supreme, and as a consequence then they get helped and they move further. So that's the first point. So we have to understand that we should not interfere with the faith of others, but we should help them in such a way that they can slowly come to the mode of goodness. Because when they come to the mode of goodness, their own understanding will practically expand and they will be able to expand, understand Krishna consciousness better. So, first principle is that in her Srimati Durga Devi is supreme because that's her consciousness. That is where she wants to go. Now, how can Srimati Durga Devi be called on equal terms with the Lord? In Srimati Durga Devi is the external potency of the Lord, but she is also Yoga Maya for devotees. So those who seek to come in touch with the Lord, she becomes Mahamaya, becomes Yoga Maya. So there is the Mahamaya Yoga Maya transference does take place. In that sense, she is the potency of the Lord of for wanting to arrange Leela. So in that sense, you can say there is some level of equality because she's a servant of the Lord. So to the extent to which she is qualified, she is equal. Does it make sense? What I'm trying to say is that this faith of your wife shouldn't be discouraged. It should not be discouraged simply because that faith is very valuable to have. There are millions of souls who do not even have that faith. So, what we should do in such circumstances where a close family member has faith which is not directly connected to the practice, we should not discourage, but we should facilitate so that they come to the mode of goodness. So, one of the ways to do it is to tell them that your worship of Mother Durga is wonderful, but don't ask for anything. Do not ask for anything. Because in the mode of passion, people ask for a lot of things. In the mode of goodness, they don't ask for anything. So you can train the person saying, don't ask for anything. Because when you ask for things from a demigod, you are actually dealing with the servants of the servants of the servants of the demigod. But if you're only going to ask for service from the demigod, then you have at least an opportunity to come directly in touch with Mother Durga. And Mother Durga sees that there's someone sincere who wants to serve, she will use that soul in the service of her Lord, who is Krishna. That's how we basically take people from different levels of faith and bring them to the lotus feet of the Lord. This is the intention of Srila Vyasadeva. That's why there were gradations of Puranas. There were different levels of access. There was a deep understanding that different levels of consciousness would want different levels of interaction with Krishna. Some may want to directly engage in interaction with the Lord. Some may want to engage with the Lord's potencies and his separated energies. So all these facilities and gradations were made by the Supreme Lord as Vyasadeva himself. So I was just wanting to give you a little bit of answer, even though you didn't ask for this elaborate answer.
I think that's definitely helpful, Prabhuji. Thank you. Yeah, definitely. I'm not discouraging my wife. I just wanted to understand how to see it, but this answers me. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Okay. Any other question or comment? Okay, there's a question here on chat. Vyasadeva's appearance, um, is it at the third Sandhya of Treta Yuga and before the first Sandhya of Dwapara? Sri Vyasa Vacha. So it is that Vyasadeva was visualizing Sutta Goswami and Shaunaka Rishi's conversation. Please clarify. So primarily, Srila Vyasadeva had already assimilated the message of Srimad Bhagavatam. The message of Srimad Bhagavatam was already assimilated into him. He had already understood the message, and this particular message was, was understood. And because he actually wrote the commentary on the Vedas, the Vedanta Sutra, after internalizing the message of the Bhagavatam. So the Bhagavatam was already inside Srila Vyasadeva. The Vedanta Sutras, is the conclusion of the Vedas, were written. And then Srila Vyasadeva brought the Bhagavatam out in physical form. Now, the Bhagavatam was first shared by Srila Vyasadeva to Sukadev Goswami. From Sukadev Goswami, it came to Parikshit Maharaj. From Parikshit Maharaj, it came to Sutta Goswami. Sutta Goswami was in the assembly. So, sorry, not from Parikshit Maharaj. From the conversation of Sukadev Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj, it was heard by Sutta Goswami. Then from Sutta Goswami to Shaunaka Rishi. So, there are so many different levels of conversation. But this does not mean Srila Vyasadeva practically heard every conversation and then put the book together. The essence in the book was already put together. It was conversation about the book that we are reading as Srimad Bhagavatam. So he wasn't visualizing Sutta Goswami and Shaunaka Rishi's conversation. He wasn't. Yeah. Sutta Goswami and Shaunaka Rishi's conversation happened because Sutta Goswami heard Shukadev Goswami speak. Sukadev Goswami heard his father speak, Vyasadeva speak. So this is a chain of disciplic succession. So there's a question here. Why do you say Hari Bol and what does it mean? Hare Krishna means Radhe Krishna. Hari Bol simply is to remind ourselves of the Yuga Dharma of chanting Harinam. The Yuga Dharma, because there are 4 yugas, there's Satya, Treta, Dwapara, Kali. There's every yuga has a certain dharma of wanting to help the soul traverse and move back up to the spiritual sky. Yeah. Every yuga has that particular dharma. Now, the point is, that particular dharma in this particular yuga was given by the incarnation of the Lord, by the Lord himself. Lord Chaitanya is non-different from from Krishna, who is the avatari. So there's non-different. So Lord Chaitanya appeared in the 15th century in Bengal. He spread the mission that we are experiencing now. And the mission itself was that to deliver oneself from the clutches of Maya, of this world, this particular yuga requires loud chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, Sankirtana. It is called Sankirtana, with like minded souls and then calling upon the names of the Lord. Now, because this is loud chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, we also constantly remind ourselves and greet ourselves that we are a part of this particular movement. And the Yuga Dharma is to chant Hari's names. That's why this Hari Bol of, obviously, if you are from Indian background, then you do understand that Bol means to say Hari's name. Yeah. This is also, I think, a typical greeting in some parts of Bengal. Like, for example, in UP, they say Ram Ram, or they say Jai Shri Ram, Ram Ram in UP, in Uttar Pradesh. Yeah, in Gujarat, I think they say Jai Shri Krishna. And then in Bengal, they do use Haribol. So this movement started in Bengal, West Bengal, and Odisha, the eastern part of India. And as a consequence, this particular, I would say, exchange of Haribol happens. Difference between Karna and Krishna. Why did Krishna choose Arjuna? Krishna chose Arjuna because Arjuna chose Krishna. It's more a matter of the devotee and the devoted. So Arjuna was the devotee. As a consequence, he basically had no other intention other than wanting to serve the Lord, and that's why they were together. But Karna, on the other hand, he had other priorities. He valued the debt he had to pay back Duryodhana as being more valuable than associating with the Lord. So the identity of being indebted became more valuable, which is more of a karmic circumstance. That's why we say Anyabhilashita Shunyam Jnana Karmadi Anavritam Anukulena Krishna Rashiranam Bhakti Ruttama. So if nothing can be evaluated, everything has to be dropped. When you're coming in touch with Krishna, he becomes a priority. So that's what it means. All right. Okay. So I have a couple of minutes if there's any other question. Um, who were the Pandavas in their past lives? I will get back. I think perhaps we could take it up as in the subsequent session because today I'm a little bit tight for time. It will take a little bit more longer for me to explain this. All right. So I think there aren't any more questions. So we'll stop here. And thank you very much for joining you all here. And we will meet again the following week and we'll continue our discussion. Hare Krishna. Wish you all a very happy week ahead.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.